Let's be honest, right out of the gate, this one hurts. But it also wasn't hard to see how thin the margin was going to be once this game got rolling. Seattle walks out of Levi's Stadium as the #1 seed. The final score reads 13-3. And for the 49ers, it really felt like the magic finally ran out at the worst possible time. From the moment we found out Ricky Pearsall wasn't going to play, the math of this game changed completely. You were asking a short-handed offense to solve one of the best, most disciplined defenses in football. And that's a brutal ask, no matter who you are. Add in the absence of Trent Williams, and suddenly everything has to be perfect just to stay afloat. And what stood out early was how steep that uphill climb was. Seattle wasn't giving anything away. They weren't biting on play action, they weren't overcommitting, and they absolutely smothered any attempt to push the ball downfield. You could feel Kyle Shanahan searching for answers almost immediately, going to trick plays in the first half, just trying to generate a spark. That's not panic. That's reality setting in. When you can't separate, can't protect consistently, and can't run the ball, you're playing football with one hand tied behind your back. Still, if you're a 49ers fan watching this, I know what you were thinking. You were waiting for that one moment, that one break, because this team has lived off those moments all season long. They've stolen wins. They've survived games they probably shouldn't have. And for a brief stretch, especially late, it felt like maybe, just maybe, something crazy could happen again. That's what made this loss sting even more. It wasn't just that Seattle was better. It's that the window was there, barely open, and it slammed shut. Before we go any further, make sure you're subscribed and notifications are turned on. We're pushing toward 1,000 subscribers, and this playoff run, however long it lasts, is going to be covered wall-to-wall right here. Also, let me know in the comments, yes or no. Did this game ever truly feel winnable to you once it got going? And if you appreciate honest breakdowns like this, hit the like button. It really does help the channel. This loss isn't about effort or heart. It's about context. It's about injuries, matchups, and execution against an elite opponent that didn't make mistakes. And to understand how this game slipped away, we have to talk about the offense, the missed chances, and the single moment that flipped everything on its head. We'll get into that next. The offense in this game felt like it was constantly operating on the edge, and that's usually a sign that everything has to go right just to stay alive. Early on, you could tell the 49ers didn't trust that they could line up and consistently win one-on-one matchups downfield. That's why you saw the trick plays. The 4th-and-1 play-action shot wasn't about being aggressive. It was about trying to steal something against a defense that was completely suffocating them. Seattle didn't bite at all. The double pitch to Christian McCaffrey didn't fool anyone either. And when those kinds of plays go nowhere, it reinforces just how locked in the defense on the other side really is. Protection was an issue all afternoon, and separation was even worse. Brock Purdy was under constant pressure, forced to speed up his process, and asked to be perfect against a front that simply overwhelmed the offensive line. And yet, he kept fighting. That's what made the brief stretch of life in the fourth quarter feel so significant. Purdy made some really impressive throws in tight windows, moving the ball when it looked almost impossible to do so. For a moment, it felt like the 49ers had finally cracked the code just enough to make this a game. And then everything turned on one play. The throw to Christian McCaffrey wasn't a bad decision. It wasn't forced. It was exactly the kind of play you trust your best offensive weapon to make. Yes, the ball was slightly tipped. Yes, it fluttered. But it still hit McCaffrey right in the hands. he'll be the first one to tell you he should have caught it. Instead, it popped up, landed in the defender's lap, and just like that, the last real chance to flip the game disappeared. If that ball is caught, you're talking about at least 3 points, maybe 7, and suddenly it's a one-score game with momentum swinging. Instead, it became the defining moment of the loss. That's what makes football so cruel sometimes. One missed execution can outweigh dozens of small wins. And this wasn't about blaming McCaffrey. This was about how razor-thin the margin was. When you're missing key pieces, you don't get to survive mistakes like that. You don't get a second chance. The offense had finally done enough to stay alive, and the turnover erased all of it in an instant. Quick question for you. In your mind, was that McCaffrey drop the true turning point? Or did this game already feel out of reach before that drive? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed. Every single playoff update, injury report, and breakdown is coming your way. And getting to 1,000 subscribers helps keep this thing rolling. Even with all of that, though, the score being 13-3 tells you something important. The offense struggled, no doubt, but the defense actually kept the 49ers in this game far longer than most people expected. And to really understand why this ended the way it did, we have to talk about the defensive effort, the missed chances, and 1 3rd and long that completely changed the tone of the afternoon. Defensively, this game is complicated, because on the surface, the score tells you the unit did enough to give the 49ers a chance. And in a lot of ways, that's true. There were moments early where the defense showed real fight, including that 4th down stop on the opening drive that could have set a tone. You saw some encouraging performances in coverage, especially from younger players stepping into bigger roles. There were pass breakups, tight windows, and a level of discipline in the secondary that simply wasn't there a week ago. Against a balanced, dangerous Seattle offense, that mattered. But the problem is, football games aren't decided by the good snaps you make. They're decided by the bad ones you can't afford. And for the 49ers, the run defense failed them in the moments that mattered most. Nothing summed that up more than the 3rd and 17. That's the play that will stick with you if you watch this game closely. You're one stop away from getting off the field, from flipping momentum, and instead, Seattle runs the ball and picks up nearly 20 yards. That's not being out-schemed. That's not being surprised. That's losing at the point of attack and failing to execute basic situational football. You could see the frustration everywhere, including up in the booth. That play wasn't just a conversion, it was a gut punch. And what made it worse was the context around it. Just a few plays earlier, the 49ers had a golden opportunity when Sam Darnold stumbled and put the ball on the ground. That's one of those dirty breaks you absolutely have to capitalize on when you're the underdog. Instead, the fumble slipped right through the defender's arms. Miss that recovery, give up a 3rd and 17 on the ground, and suddenly, a game that could have stayed tight turns into a 2-possession hole. Seattle understood exactly who they were in this game. They leaned into the run, controlled the tempo, and never let the 49ers breathe. Over and over again, they stayed ahead of the chains and forced San Francisco to defend the same thing repeatedly. And while there were flashes of solid pass defense, the inability to consistently stop the run completely erased those positives, allowing chunk gains, especially in obvious run situations, kept the defense on the field and wore them down. Let me know what you think here. Do you still see the run defense as the biggest concern heading into the playoffs? Yes or no? Drop that in the comments. And if you appreciate breakdowns that aren't sugar-coated, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. We're closing in on 1,000 subscribers, and your support genuinely helps this channel grow. The hardest part is that the defense did enough to keep the score manageable, but not enough to flip the game. And when you're already struggling, offensively, those missed defensive opportunities become magnified. Now, with the regular season over and the playoffs staring this team in the face, the conversation has to shift toward health, availability, and whether this roster can get enough bodies back to make a real push. That's where we're headed next. Now the focus shifts to what really matters moving forward, and that's health. Because as frustrating as this loss was, the bigger concern is what shape this team is going to be in when the playoffs kick off. Brock Purdy took a tough hit late, and seeing him come off with blood on his throwing hand is never something you want to see. The good news is that it appears to be more of a stinger than anything serious, and all signs point to him being okay. Still, it was another reminder of how much punishment he absorbed in this game and why the coaching staff was so hesitant to put him in obvious drop-back situations all afternoon. The linebacker situation is where things get a little more uncomfortable. You're potentially looking at multiple injuries that could affect availability in the wild card round, and that's on top of a defense that has already been stretched thin. When you're facing playoff-caliber offenses, losing bodies at the second level is dangerous, especially when stopping the run has already been an issue. There's hope that reinforcements could be coming later, but that timeline matters. The reality is, the wild card round might come a little too soon for some of those returns, and that's what makes this next game such a massive measuring stick. The 49ers are going on the road. There's no safety net anymore. You're likely looking at a physical, hostile environment against a team that's going to test your depth immediately. For younger players who have been thrust into bigger roles this season, this is where the experience becomes invaluable. Whether it's in the secondary or along the front seven, these snaps matter not just for this postseason, but for what this roster looks like moving forward. I'm curious how you're feeling about this part of it. Are you more worried about the offense getting healthy or the defense holding up with the injuries piling up? Let me know in the comments. And if you want full injury updates and matchup breakdowns all week, make sure you're subscribed and notifications are on. We're getting closer to 1,000 subscribers, and every bit of support helps as this playoff run gets underway. Because, even with all the frustration from this loss, there's still a bigger picture to talk about. This team wasn't supposed to be here given everything that went wrong during the season, and yet they found a way to win 12 games. To really process this loss, you have to zoom out and look at what this season actually was and what it still can be. That's the perspective we'll close with next. When you zoom out and really look at this season as a whole, it's hard not to come away with a sense of perspective, even after a loss like this. Finishing 12-5 with everything this team dealt with is not normal. It's borderline remarkable. Expectations had to be recalibrated early, especially as injuries piled up on both sides of the ball. And yet the 49ers kept finding ways to win games they probably shouldn't have. The pipe dream was always the #1 seed. It was there on the final day. But it required everything to line up perfectly. And against a healthy, elite Seattle team, it just didn't. This game felt like all the underlying issues finally converged at once. The erosion of the run defense, the lack of separation downfield, the offensive line missing its anchor, and the absence of key playmakers all showed up together. Against lesser teams, the 49ers were able to mask some of those problems with effort, creativity, and timely breaks. Against a top-tier defense that didn't make mistakes, there was nowhere to hide. And that doesn't make this team bad. It makes them human. There's also value in what's coming next, regardless of how far this playoff run goes. These young players are getting real, meaningful snaps. They're being tested in high-leverage situations. That experience matters, as this organization turns the page toward the future, especially with core veterans expected back and the roster recalibrating for what comes next. If the 49ers can find a way to win on the road in the wild card round, suddenly the conversation changes. Suddenly, you start talking about momentum, confidence, and maybe even reinforcements returning at the right time. If they don't, it doesn't erase what this season was. It doesn't undo the resilience, the growth, or the fact that this team maximized its circumstances more often than not. Sometimes the better team wins. Sometimes the breaks don't go your way. And sometimes the magic just runs out. Let me know where you stand right now. Do you still believe this team can go on the road and win a playoff game? Or does this loss change how you see things? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you've stuck with this channel through the ups and downs, make sure you're subscribed and hit the like button. We're pushing toward 1,000 subscribers, and your support means more than you know.